Anyway, good morning. This is the Christmas season, right? Are you excited for the Christmas season? We have poinsettias. Do you guys decorate for the Christmas season? So is everybody busy decorating? Do you wait till December 1st? October. Good solid wait till October. Thanksgiving, it's the whole world. It's funny because the whole world really starts prepping for Jesus' birthday, right? Whether you're a celebrator of Jesus or not, we choose to celebrate his birthday. Now, it's interesting because, and this is the part where I destroy all of your Christmas and tell you how nothing's biblical and everything, but no, I'm not going to do that this year yet. There's all these traditions and things that we do that aren't necessarily biblical, but they're kind of traditions that are developed. Spoiler, Jesus probably wasn't born on December 25th. Oh, I know. And it's unlikely he had a Christmas tree. I know. And it's interesting. I met a guy from Africa one time who came to our tree farm, and I was like, oh, it's probably the first tree. He's like, oh, no, we do Christmas trees in Africa, too. And I'm like, what? Thought that was a weird year. Anyway. But yeah, people do all these things all over. But we celebrate Jesus. He never traveled that far from his house compared to, a lot of us have traveled around the world. He was, had teen parents, basically, teen mom, the original. And so, he never held a political office. He was never, a well-known politician. But it's interesting. We mark time in the Western world by his birth. You travel, sometimes they have different years in different countries, which is really funny to get, but most of us in the Western world, we mark time by his birth. Although we did get it wrong by about 4 years, and that's, a guy kind of guessed, but, 600 years later, he guessed about when it was, so being 4 years off is pretty good. But Jesus was probably born about 4 BC. Anyway, so we're looking at Christmas, and let's just say this Christmas is going to be lit. Because Jesus said in John 8, chapter 8, verse 12, Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have a light that leads to life. And so it's the greatest story ever told. It is the story of Christmas. And Jesus promises that we won't have to walk in darkness. Jesus promises that we will have life. And so Christmas, I was trying to think of a word to capture the essence of what Christmas is for me. And every year we kind of think of a word or something or some aspect of it because, it's coming up to Christmas, so we're going to do a Christmas series. We're going to talk about Christmas. but the word I was thinking about is it's a time to celebrate, right? Because ultimately the light has come. Jesus comes. And so we celebrate at Christmas, we celebrate his birth because of so much that he does later. If you were just reading the gospel the first time, you might not catch it all. But we're going to talk about in Luke. See what I did there? So those of you who are newer, I occasionally refer to the Gospel of Luke. But if by occasionally you mean always, I've been fascinated by the Gospel. It's an interesting book. And so we're going to look in Luke chapter 1, starting in verse 1. It says, many people have set out to write accounts about the events that have been fulfilled among us. They have used the eyewitness reports circulating among us from the early disciples. Having carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I also have decided to write an accurate account for you, most honorable Theophilus, so that you can be certain of the truth of everything you were taught. And so Luke is an historian. And so he kind of goes, and if you like Greek histories and stuff, there's all this stuff that's going on that they typically do there, and the way he writes, and you want to read Dioscorides or anything. Anyway, and so Luke, he's this historian, and I like a guy named Mark Driscoll describes him as he's the cut man in Paul's corner, because if you some of you get that from boxing references. Some of you like Rocky, and you're like, yeah, I'm there. I got it now. Cut him. No, but Paul was often getting into physical altercations as he proclaimed Jesus. He got beat up a lot. He was shipwrecked. And so this guy named Luke, the doctor, because he was a medical doctor of the day, Luke was following him around. And so we kind of, he's the cut man. In fact, one of the last things Paul writes in 2 Timothy, is that Luke didn't abandon him like so many others did. And so he's this friend of Paul, and probably, if looking at when Paul was imprisoned, it probably would have been, if Mary were about 15 years old when Jesus was born, possibly about 75 when Paul's in prison in Caesarea. So, he goes, and so Luke writes this cool thing, and if you've probably heard me before, Luke and Acts are kind of like one book, but not. Acts is like this continuation of it, and if you're really interested, they're both about the length of one commercially available scroll of the day. So, you kind of like Twitter, you have 140 characters, you had so many feet of scroll, and, they're about 4% different in length, I think. And so there's, there's these two scrolls, and the cool thing about Luke that I think is fascinating is, who wrote most of the New Testament? Yeah, he wrote more books, but Luke writes an awful lot. So, you can kind of debate over who wrote most anyway. And so, it's this big chunk of thing. And then he writes it to this guy named Theophilus. Now, there's a couple of little factual things for people who like this kind of stuff. We don't know if Theophilus is a real person, because you know what it means? God lover. So we don't know if it was like a patron or just this is like written for our benefit. It's kind of masked as that. I like to picture it as a real person. That's because that's the way I am. And so, if he was like a real person, I picture him wasting money, because if you're rich, you waste money on lots of stuff. Anyone, just even if you're not rich, you waste money on some stuff, you pay for things, and you throw it in the yard sale pile later, you're like, why did I ever buy that? He probably wasted his money on a lot of things, but probably, this was like a good investment. And so, he kind of bankrolled the gospel, if you will. And so we read. So that's kind of the introductory thing. But then we start into what is arguably the Christmas story, but we're not going to start right with Jesus. And in Luke chapter 1, verse 5, it says, when Herod was king of Judea, there was a Jewish priest named Zechariah, who was a member of the priestly order of Abiah, and his wife Elizabeth was also from the priestly line of Aaron. Zechariah and Elizabeth were righteous in God's eyes, careful to obey all the Lord's commandments and regulations. They had no children because Elizabeth was unable to conceive, and they were both very old. So, Herod, now, there's been lots of stuff. We talk about Herod occasionally when we get to it, but he was officially king from 37 to 4 BC, which is kind of why we know that Jesus was born before BC, before 0, and so he was this big kind of well-known king. But here we have two people who have no children. Now, if you don't have kids today, a lot of people just choose not to have kids. It's not a big deal. But in those days, it was kind of like a social shame. People thought maybe you'd sinned or something, you'd done something wrong, and so they didn't have kids. And this is like your social security of the day, too. Like, we grow old in America, and, it may not be tons of money, but you at least have social security when you get old. In those days, your social security was your kids working and taking care of you. In a lot of other cultures, your kids take care of you. I posted something in the Facebook group about some of the cool stuff in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, they think it's weird that we don't live with our parents. Even if you're an adult, they're like, you don't live with your parents? That's weird, man. Because, in a lot of other traditional cultures, you take care of your parents. Now, some of you are like, I don't want to take care of my parents. Just be glad you live in America then. But, this was your social security. This is what, and so they were old, and Actually, Zechariah, we talked about marriage a while back, he could have kicked Elizabeth to the curb because people assumed if you didn't have kids, it was the woman's fault. And so, but probably people during his life like, hey, you need to get rid of, her, but he's kind of like, he's old, thinking of kids, that ship has passed. He's gotten to a point, maybe, where some of us have prayed for something and it hasn't happened, and you're at the point where you're like, it just ain't gonna happen because it's too long. I'm too old. And so that ship has passed. Think retirement years, not the just married. Because when you just get married, what's the first thing people always ask you? When are you going to have kids? Because that's the only function of marriage. But it's a natural thing that happens. And so when young couples, we often think, oh, we're going to have kids. You usually don't go into a modern maturity center, walk up to an older couple and go, hey, when are you going to have kids? 50 years ago, not now. And so, but picture godly couple. These are like the nice, sweet little couple that you see walking at Walmart that you like. And this is like the nice couple that you like to live next door. Not the cranky guy who steals your ball if it rolls near his yard. Don't think that. Think godly, not cranky. It says in verse 8, it says, one day Zechariah was serving God in the temple, for his order was on duty that week. As was the custom of the priest, he was chosen by lot to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and burn incense. And while the incense was being burned, a great crowd stood outside praying. Now, there are possibly, we have to guess. There wasn't a census number of exact priests and things, but there are probably about 18,000 priests at this point. So he's just one of 18,000. And it's kind of like, some of us, some of us are military and they're in the reserves. He's like, this is his reserve, his 2 weeks duty once a month kind of thing. They didn't need them all the time. So he's like part-time priest. He was there. And possibly only, once in his life, you would actually get the job of going in to burn incense. Now, some of you think incense, you're thinking a whole other thing. I had some neighbors who burned incense and it wasn't for religious purposes at all. I'm pretty sure I couldn't. We had an apartment one time. I'm pretty sure I can't pass a drug test because every time I went in the bathroom, I could smell what was going on downstairs. Anyway, I was going to tell you a whole other story about them, but I won't. And so, there's incense, and this is symbolic of prayers going up to God. And it was part of the temple worship if you study it. And so he was supposed to go in and burn some incense. It was his job. And sometimes we say they'd have a rope on him and all this kinds of stuff. We don't think they probably did that. Anyway, but while Zechariah was in the sanctuary, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing to the right of the incense altar. Zechariah was shaken and overwhelmed with fear when he saw him. Now, we say this all the time because when we picture angels in pop culture, what do we picture? Nice flowing wings. You see an angel, and what do? Every time they show up in the Bible, people get scared. They're not just scared, they're scared. They're really, really scared. And so, don't think touched by an angel, think terrified by the angel. Because, you're just going in here. There's not supposed to be anyone else in, especially. And, I hate to be scared because I kick. And if you pop out of the corner and scare me, this building's cool. It's got all kinds of nooks and crannies like an English muffin. But, you jump out of one of those nooks and crannies, you're going to get kicked. And so I don't know that he kicked at the angel. But, the angel just kind of shows up, kind of like when you don't realize someone's in the room, and suddenly there's someone in the room. And then it's not just someone, but it's like someone terrifying and creepy. So this powerful being shows up in a place he wasn't supposed to be. He's just going to sprinkle some incense and take off. Boom! Scared by an angel. It's the redneck version for southern Delaware. Scared. It's like scared, but more Delaware. Welcome to Delaware. So, scared by an angel. It'll be a new show we could have. And people just go, ah! Rednecks running everywhere. It'd be great. But the angel said, and this is what they always say, don't be afraid, Zechariah. God has heard your prayer. And you kind of wonder, like, what was he praying at that moment? Was he praying about this? Was it, but I can't imagine him praying about this because, like, it's been a while. Like, that prayer has been prayed, that ship has passed, we're done with this, but, God heard your prayer, maybe the answer's coming a little later than you were thinking. It says, your wife Elizabeth will give you a son, and you're to name him John. So your wife, it's not going to be some other woman. You don't have to, it's going to be her. And you're going to have a son, and you're going to name him John, which is, picking baby names is hard, right? Like, if you've ever had a kid, that's the hardest thing, because you don't know if you're going to, like, scar your kid for life with a terrible name. Maybe you didn't think of it, you just got lucky, or there was a news article this week, someone named their kid A, B, C, D, E. I don't want to get into the politics of it. Maybe there's a good reason, but, that's a tough name to get through life with. So, you don't have to think about that when an angel tells you what to name him, and he names him John, which means God is gracious. And so God is being gracious to them in their old age. And then you're going to have this son. You will have great joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth, for it will be great in the eyes of the Lord. I mean, you're not just going to have a kid, you're going to have a godly kid who God thinks is great. I mean, this is good news, right? Not like, this is not the kid you wish you didn't have. This is like the good kid. Which my parents would say was me, not my brother. I'm kidding. Just tease my brother because he's probably not listening to the podcast. He must never touch wine or any alcoholic drinks. He'll be filled with the Holy Spirit even before birth. And this was this idea. This was this Nazaritic oath. Like some of us, we've been studying the book of Judges on Wednesday night, and they were like Samson was a Nazarite. Not Nazarene, he didn't join a denomination, but it was this oath. You didn't touch dead animals, you didn't drink, and so it's kind of like that, and so John's going to be different. He's not going to touch any alcohol. He'll be filled with the Holy Spirit even before birth. Generally in the Old Testament, people got to get filled and touched with the Spirit here and there, but it doesn't really like reside in you like it does in the New Testament time. But John, from his birth, that's pretty young. So this is like the kid who's going to grow up knowing God early. And so it's that kind of moment. It says, he'll turn many Israelites to the Lord their God. He will be a man full of the spirit and power of Elijah, who was this great prophet in the Old Testament, who was powerful. He will prepare the people for their coming to the Lord. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and cause those who are rebellious to accept the wisdom of the godly. And so it's this awesome, your wife's going to give you a son. You've probably prayed it hundreds of times. This is it's a surprise too, because, surprises are great. Like Christmas, when you open something and it's like an awesome gift. Are you happy? Yeah, especially if you didn't know it was coming, you're like, oh, that's awesome. Like this week, some of you saw on Facebook, I put my winter coat on for the first time, which I didn't need to wear today. And I reached in my pocket and I found a full-size Butterfinger. It was a glorious day. So I had coffee and Butterfinger for breakfast. Because I wasn't saving that for lunch. I was like, that was a gift from heaven. That was a good surprise. Can I get an amen? Some of you don't like Butterfinger? No, you better like Butterfinger. It's God's candy bar. He dropped it in my pocket. It's like manna from heaven. It was beautiful. He knew I needed that pick-me-up. I needed a little sugar to get through Friday morning. It was tough. Anyway, so it's that kind of a good surprise. It's this beautiful moment, and it's this cool thing. And there's something we miss out sometimes on. When he says he's going to do all this stuff, this really comes out of Malachi. Or I like to say Malachi, the Italian prophet, because I like to be cool and have jokes. What's Tre Sorelle Dolce? It's Tre Sorelli. Did you know that? They were pronouncing in a football game. I text Mike. I'm like, hey, are they pronouncing that right? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been saying it wrong. It's Italian, So we're going to honor that. Tre Sorelle helps us with Malachi. So Malachi says this. So look, I am sending you the prophet Elijah before the great and dreadful day of the Lord arise. Says preaching will turn the hearts of their fathers to their children, and the hearts of children to their fathers. Otherwise, I will come and strike the land with a curse. So there's all these prophecies in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, about the one one who is to come. And so John is the precursor to the Messiah. And so they're saying, hey, the Messiah's coming. John's coming first, and he's going to prepare the way. And so he's this forerunner. He's preparing the way for the Messiah. Incredible moment, right? It's about to end. Verse 18. Zechariah said to the angel, how can I be sure this will happen? I'm an old man now. My wife is well along in years. Like, I'm old. She old. She long in the tooth. She can't, I don't know if you understand, but these things don't happen, so I need some kind of sign or something. There's this doubt. We're a bit old for this, and we tried, it didn't work. And if you ever watch, Rudolph was on TV, which my kids don't understand why I had to watch Rudolph when it came on TV this week. I own at least 2 versions of it. I have the original uncut version. If you've ever seen that, some of the scenes from the uncut version were on the televised one. People are like, what? There's it's slightly misogynistic at points. Women can't go search, and there's edited scenes out. But like Rudolph, I love it on the island of misfit toys, and the one toy is like, I have no dreams left to dream. If you know that's kind of where they are. They're like, we have no dreams left to dream. What do you mean? You're telling me Santa's going to pick me up and bring me to somebody who wants a Jack in the Box that's not Jack? And, anyway. Some of the toys could have been just fixed with a little paint and rename it. I'm just saying. But, like, when misfit toys, we pray for kids a year, that we thought the answer was no. What? And the funny thing to me is because now, if you've read the Hebrew Bible, if you've read the Old Testament, there's all these stories, right? Of people who get really old and then have a kid. And it's not like the Bible's saying something that's normal. Like, you don't normally go into modern maturity. You see a lady on her walker, and you're like, oh, when did you do? That's not normal. But there's these instances where God does these amazing things. There's Sarah and Abraham. Abraham's father of the Jewish people. Sarah was old. She's having a kid. You don't expect it. People are not in their 90s normally having kids. You better watch the doctors. Rebecca and Isaac, it was the same thing. Samson's mother, she was getting along and, was a little older. Hannah, the mother of Samuel. There's all these biblical examples of people who they probably prayed for kids, didn't happen. And then God does something, and so he's kind of in the Zechariah should have realized, hey, you're the line of all this, but he's like, hey, how can I be sure? And then the angel said, I am Gabriel. I stand in the very presence of God. It was he who sent me to bring you this good news. But now, since you don't believe what I said, you will be silent and others will speak until the child is born. For my words will certainly be fulfilled at the proper time. And so basically, you want a sign? Here you go. You're playing charades for 3 months. Or 9 months. I forget how, kids take 9 months, right? Okay. Woo! My science ain't so good. I'm from southern Delaware. We get scared. We do medical stuff. Anyway, a lot of smart people down here in southern Delaware, though. So you're going to play a 9-month game of charades. Like you're not going to be able to talk for 9 months. Is that you want a sign? There you go. So you might want to be careful asking God for a sign in your attitude, because I'm just saying, some of you might be like, that's great for Elizabeth. 9 months of finally the guy Zechariah shuts up. Anyway, meanwhile, the people are waiting for Zechariah to come out of the sanctuary, wondering why he takes so long. Because again, how long does it take to go in, burn some incense, come out? I don't know. I don't burn incense, but I'm thinking a couple minutes, right? We had these crystals when the kids were young. We had them when we were a kid, and then we saved them for a special time, and the next thing you know, you've got kids and you never finished using them. One of those things. We found them on the online. It's like crystals you throw into the fire, and it burns a pretty color. Some of you know what those are. Yeah, we found them the other day. We're like, apparently we still have them, because same thing. We saved them for a special time, and now our kids don't care. Which is a whole other lesson in and of itself. And so it's that kind of, you just got to throw some stuff, make sure it catches fire, I always picture him backing out. I don't know why. I picture him going in and then backing out. And so I don't know if he had to back out or walk out. But, it only take a couple minutes, right? And so everyone's outside and they're like, you get their sundials. They're like, we got lunch coming up. We got dinner. I got plans. What's taking this guy so long? So what's going on? It should only take a few minutes. And then he comes out. One of the things, when he finally did come out, he couldn't speak to them, and they realized from his gestures and silence he must have seen a vision in the sanctuary. So he's out. He's playing Pictionary. He's playing charades. He's like, 2 words, sounds like, sounds like, I don't know, angle, angel, I don't know, I'm terrible at charades. Anyway, he's playing charades. He couldn't text people because he didn't have a cell phone. Now it'd be like no big deal. It'd be like, people don't talk anyway. I literally have seen my children sit next to another teenager and text each other. Like, you could also talk. The person is next to you. Anyone else, anyone admit, you ever text someone who's in the same room as you? Usually it's to say something you don't want everyone else to hear, though. Oh, better stop that. And so he couldn't text. No cell phones. They didn't get a signal then because they didn't have phones. It says, verse 23, when Zechariah's week of service in the temple was over, he returned home. Soon afterward, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant and went into seclusion for 5 months. How kind the Lord is, she claimed. He has taken away my disgrace from my children. Now, I often wondered about the seclusion. I wondered if she wasn't entirely sure what was going to happen herself, or, but I said that, she couldn't just take the EPT or whatever, the pregnancy test, to go, look, guys, I think she waited till she got that baby bump. Then she's walking out, she's 90-something, so I picture, hey, guys, just having my kid because God's redeeming. And so she waited till she could take a selfie with the baby bump. Today if you see a picture online of a woman who's really old, you're thinking either tumor or you're like, oh, that was photoshopped. And so it's that kind of moment, and then it's this kind of cool moment because you get this happy old couple with a kid. It's kind of this beautiful story. It's part of this greatest story told because ultimately this points to he's preparing the way for Jesus. He's like the pre-birthday. And so this season we celebrate because God is ultimately fulfilling his promise. Again, I say this enough, you probably, if you don't remember this, I'll tell you again. The Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, points to who Jesus is. It's not like, I think there's this tendency if you read the New Testament, you're like, oh man, God's doing this new thing. But if you go through and you read and you study, because sometimes we miss all these things point in the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament to the fact that Jesus is coming. They point to the fact that the Messiah is going to come. And so all this points to that. And this is, God is beginning to fulfill that moment. And I think if you would jump ahead in Luke chapter 24, there's this moment where Jesus is walking, and some of the disciples are there, and they're walking on the road to Emmaus. Some of you do the journey to Emmaus thing, so you understand. And so they're walking on Emmaus, and they're kind of walking, and then Jesus kind of walks up next to them and kind of blends in with them. He's like, hey, why are you guys so sad? And they're like, what, are you crazy? What, you didn't notice all this stuff going on? And so he's like, no, what? And they're telling him all this stuff, which I think is this funny Jedi mind trick. I am not the Jesus you're looking for. And so Jesus is just kind of walking along with them, and he's talking to them, and they're like, we were hoping he'd be the one to redeem Israel. And here's the thing, get to this, chapter 24, verse 25 says, that Jesus said to them, you foolish people, you find it so hard to believe that all the prophets wrote in the scriptures? Wasn't it clearly predicted the Messiah would have to suffer all these things before entering his glory? Then Jesus took them through the writings of Moses, which the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and all the prophets, explaining from all the scriptures the things concerning himself. And Christmas is the beginning of all this fulfillment. We can celebrate because Jesus has come. We celebrate because God's plan, is unfolded. It's revealed to us. We begin to understand. We celebrate not just because a baby was born, but because of who the baby is. I love my kids. We celebrate them on our birthdays, but most of you don't. You don't decorate your house for 6 months from, my son's birthday. If you do, that's weird. I love him, great kid. But, you're not there's something different about Jesus, and it's God's plan being fulfilled. And the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, if you've ever, built a large building, anyone ever been, next to, a big building being constructed? It's like they take forever on the basement. You ever notice that? I remember watching a very large building being constructed. It was yep, it's a hole in the ground. There were a bunch of guys in there all day long, and it's still a hole in the ground. Or even if you build a house on a smaller scale, it's yep, it's a hole in the ground, and they poured some concrete, and it's still a hole in the ground. And the bigger the building is, the more time it takes to kind of work on the foundation and get things done. And that's, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, is the foundation. It was God preparing to redeem. And in the New Testament, we see when Jesus shows up, he's the house going up. And ultimately at the cross, it's the house is complete. And it's that moment, that long-anticipated kingdom is coming. And the Christmas, then, is this time to reach out. Now, I got a text yesterday, last night, actually. We were doing, for those of you who don't know, Trey Sorelli, the town of Wyoming, there's this event with a certain guy wearing a red suit, and so Santa shows up on the fire truck last night, greeting kids and everything, and we kind of had we do a part of it. We do, Christmas cookies and everything and decorating. I mostly do Christmas cookie eating because there's some that are broken. And we want to give out complete cookies to people. We don't want to give broken cookies to people. So I had to get those off the table, And you have to ice them too because you want to hide the brokenness before you eat. Get rid of them. No, I mostly talk to people and everything, hang out. But I got this text from somebody, and they were like, now I'm not being critical of the person who sent me the text. Don't hear that. They're a friend. And they actually said something nice, but I think you could hear it in a negative way. They're like, I can't imagine our church doing that. And they wrestle with it theologically because some churches want to distance themselves from the St. Nicholas. And here's the thing. I can't imagine not doing that. Christmas is the season to celebrate. There's all kinds of stuff that really aren't in the Bible. Santa Claus isn't in the Bible, but he's St. Nicholas, and there's a cool story behind that. And Christmas trees, not in the Bible. But you know what? There's some cool traditions and meanings that we can get from that. Hanging stocks, by the fire. Sometimes they do that when they're wet after hunting. But you probably have prettier tech. There's all these kind of wreaths and holly, and there's all these cool things that we do that really aren't Jesus-y. But they're not un-Jesus-y. And I'm not criticizing my friend. I'm not criticizing the church. He wasn't criticizing. He's just kind of like, hey, he's like, I hope it goes well. I hope you do well. Here's the thing. Because, with churches, I have said this before, we're all on the same team. Right? If you're Team Jesus, you're Team Jesus. I don't care where you go on Sunday. We'd love you to come hang out here. We like people, we have a cool community, but we'd love people to come. But, we're all on the same team. Some people try to set us up as adversarial with other churches. I've literally heard people say you're our rivals. I'm like, really? So you're Team Satan? Because those are your choices. And it really annoys people when you do that. So it's fun even all the more. Just keep playing like you don't hear them, trying to correct themselves or no. So you're Team Satan. Let me tell you about Jesus. Let me tell you why Jesus is a better team. But. We're on the same team. And we land differently theologically on some of these things. Some churches distance something. But here's the thing. Christmas is this time to proclaim Jesus. And if you give me that opportunity over cookies, I'm going to proclaim Jesus and eat a cookie. If you give me that opportunity, over running a fun event for kids, I'm going to take that opportunity. I'm going to proclaim Jesus. I'm going to eat a cookie. That'll be our thing for the whole season. We'll just always eat a cookie. Here's the thing. You can't proclaim Christ to people if you're not with people. And it's funny because church people can get to the point where they never go outside of, seeing other church people. That's weird. That's a cult. We're about to drink Kool-Aid up in here, when we get there. Some of you get that. But you have to be, God is a missionary God. And we're going to talk about Jesus coming to earth. It's like a missionary. If you know what a missionaries basically go where the gospel isn't. And they bring the good news of Jesus, and then kind of we broadly have all kinds of missionary efforts. Again, I posted some cool stuff about Ethiopia in the Facebook group. We're all made to be missionaries. Some of you are not going to Ethiopia. Some of you might. I don't know. We're all made to be missionaries where we are. And God reached out when we don't know him. God reached out when we were going the wrong way, doing the wrong things. God reached out when we were enemies and strangers to him. And he reaches out in the midst of that and reveals himself for who he is. He loves us. He offers us redemption. And then we get to be part of that. We get to be a part of things God's doing. And Christmas season is missionary season. Not that you hunt missionaries. It's the season. It's like deer season. It's the season to reach out to people. It's the season. Christmas is the time for mission. Zechariah and Elizabeth. Here's a happy old couple. God put them in a place to proclaim who he is to their neighbors. Hey, my God's the God that heard my prayer and answered it even as an old lady in a walker. And she's not even really in a walker, but that's how I picture her. And God puts us all in a place to proclaim him. Some of you have jobs, you're going to reach people I never could talk to. So some of you have neighbors, you have friends, you have people, that God puts us in places so that we can share who he is. And we're all on this mission. And so this season, embrace your place. Embrace where God's put you. Because God redeems things. Even if you're in the place you are because you're jacked up and did a bunch of stupid stuff, God will redeem that. If you're in your place because you followed God and you've ended up where you are, no matter whether you've had a good life, bad life, you are where you are. And God will use that. He will use your place to proclaim who he is. So the Christmas season, remember to celebrate. And remember, invite a friend. If you're not sure how to witness, invite them to Christmas Eve service. Everybody likes a candle, little Jesus. And we'll even have cookies, so I'm sure. Well, now I got to put that on the flyer. Someone clip this out, But Christmas is the season we celebrate Jesus. It's the season where we can reach out to our friends and neighbors and proclaim who he is, because they're all preparing for his birthday, whether they understand it or not. So as the worship team comes back to play, we'll remind you we have the cards. You can fill them